All right, so here with another episode of R&R, and this time we're going to talk about the week about culturally relevant and culturally sustaining pedagogies. So I'll be honest, when I first started this journey into PDP with Education 400, I had no idea what pedagogy meant or even how to pronounce it. I now have a better understanding of what that means. So yeah, let's just delve right into this one. So this topic was pretty interesting. It ties into a lot of ideas that have been circulating in my head as I go through this program. So culturally relevant pedagogy. What this one talks about is how in certain areas, certain schools, the system was not really effective in having students learn. So what was used instead was a more, relevant approach. Maybe not relevant, but it connected better with the students that it was being presented to, and I believe this one was through the use. Let's see here. I've kind of got to find. I think it was like, what was it? Through hip hop and rap music to kind of teach. And what they found was that it was actually better in engaging the students that I was presented to in that given area. Can't remember the specifics, but I remember they were using like hip hop and rap as a way, and it read this like first wave class, of hip hop, and led to really good results. And it had the students being more outgoing, more engaged with the learning, and it was really interesting to see. Like they would create art, like works of hip hop, and they would share it, at poetry slams and festivals and ciphers. So this was really cool to see that they were able to use something not traditionally taught in schools and to kind of bring it in and have it as a way to teach students. It's more tools, more ways to kind of engage with students. So that was really cool. Then we'll move on to the culturally sustaining pedagogy. This was almost like a follow-up because it does reference the previous article, the culturally relevant pedagogy, a lot, and kind of further expands on how effective the use of different forms of culture are in teaching. And culturally sustaining pedagogy, what it aims to do is to have a way that carries on in between schools, generations. Here it is. Maintaining cultural heritage, right? So what this kind of brings me to is how we can approach Indigenous education as a form of culturally sustaining and relevant pedagogy. Because if the goal is to kind of try and help to revitalize Indigenous people's way of life and teachings, then obviously this has to be somehow integrated into our classrooms. And what I want to say, so this kind of connects to the whole cultural aspect of cultural appreciation versus cultural appreciation. Appropriation and appreciation. And we don't really want to appropriate, but how can we teach in a way that doesn't come off as appropriating? And where was it? Actually, it was in my Pro D Day lesson today, actually. A question came up where, how can we teach Indigenous pedagogies in schools and classrooms without, being of that background? And what was the answer that was applied? This was in the Burnaby school district's presentation. What he suggested was that, sometimes you just have to try and push for it and take the risk, do the work, obviously, do the background research as best as we can, and all comes into how we present it. And what he said was this is, for example, he would say, this is where I learned this, these teachings. This is how it was presented to me. This is the extent of our knowledge. And the key quote, he said, we have to acknowledge that we don't have the knowledge, right? If we don't. And present it as best as we can. In case, someone does call you, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Then you have to be able to own up to that, right? And to be able to teach Indigenous people's pedagogy in a classroom is a way that we can help to kind of bring the culture, Indigenous people's cultures, to the forefront, and giving students exposure and knowledge to things they might not have been exposed to throughout their lives. So yeah, sustaining heritage and community practices. Yep. So that's exactly what I want to get at. Yeah, so this was a pretty good example and cases of how to integrate different forms of culture, hip-hop practices, for example, into the classroom, and a way that we can kind of bridge it to sustaining pedagogies. And so from here on out, I think the goal is to find a way to integrate Indigenous people's way of life and pedagogy into the classroom in a way that is acceptable, in a way that is, I guess, a way that can connect with and engage with students. So it's going to be a lot of work, especially in my personal field of, or at least not my expertise, but kind of, what I'm kind of trained to do which is sciences. So it's definitely a challenge for me to try and find ways to incorporate Indigenous pedagogies into what I know. And yeah, that's part of the journey too, is overcoming the challenge, being able to do the work and see how I can best teach and engage youths with this kind of newfound information. Okay, so that's it for today's episode. So we're at the time of recording. This is Wednesday, so we got about a couple more episodes. I only plan to do this during the Exploration C, but we'll see. Maybe there'll be more episodes in this mini-series. Okay, so that's it for today.